All right, well, welcome everyone. My name is Nicole Munson, and I am the Ops and Programs Coordinator here at American Friends of Combatants for Peace. I first just wanted to say thank you for joining us today. If this is your first talk with us, Combatants for Peace is a joint Israeli-Palestinian community working in solidarity to end the occupation, discrimination, and oppression. We believe in a world where all people, from the river to the sea, live in peace with justice, dignity, and liberty. This movement was founded about 20 years ago by Israeli and Palestinian fighters from opposing sides who chose to lay down their weapons and work together for peace and justice. They have been nominated twice for the Nobel Peace Prize. And American Friends is the US arm of the movement, and all of us make up a diverse community that extends beyond borders to work for collective liberation in Palestine and Israel. Today, our talk is called Another Way Forward, Co-Creating Amid Catastrophe. We will hear from our founders of the movement and they'll be reflecting on the past year, as well as one of our other supporters. Some housekeeping items before we begin. This talk will be an hour and 15 minutes. It will be recorded and sent to all of our registrants tomorrow. So if you're listening in from the future, we're welcoming you now. We invite audience members to ask questions throughout. So if you want to ask a question, you can send those in the chat to Lindsay from the AFCFP team. Her name says send questions here. So if you want to send those to her throughout, please feel free to do so. And I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's talk, Tiffany Goodwin-Van. Tiffany has led grassroots and national NGOs for 20 years and has served as the executive director of AFCFP since 2022. Her professional and spiritual path is shaped by her evangelical and Quaker heritage, a diverse range of mentors, decades of work in systematically marginalized and resilient communities, and her identity as an artist, activist, and mother. She centers her work on cultivating peace rooted in justice and justice rooted in love. So thank you, Tiffany, for facilitating the discussion today. I will hand it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining us this last collective ed meeting of the year. Many of you have been journeying with us since the beginning of the year. Some of you might be newer. And it truly is an honor to gather together as we close a difficult year and look ahead to more challenges. I also want to thank our three speakers. Nicole, do you mind making Avner host? Uh, we have three speakers today, two of them CFP members. One of them has her own nonprofit and is a huge and important supporter of our work. Our first speaker is Souli Khatib, also known as Souli. He's the Palestinian co-founder of Combatants for Peace and Ripples Collective. He's a renowned international speaker and activist and co-author of In This Place Together, A Palestinian Journey to Collective Liberation. He serves on the board of Elham and American Friends of Combatants for Peace, my organization. He has been co-nominated with his Israeli partner Chen 2 times for the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of the movement. Our second speaker is Avner Wishnitzer. He is the Israeli co-founder of Combatants for Peace and professor of history at Tel Aviv University. He served as a combatant in the elite commando unit Sayeret Kal in 2003. In 2003, he was part of a group of reserve soldiers and officers who publicly refused to serve in the occupied territories. And that is what started his journey to found the movement. In 2010, he was awarded the Goldberg IEE Prize for Peace in the Middle East, together with another CFP co-founder, Bassam Arami. He resides with his family in Jerusalem today. And our third speaker is Mehra Rimer. She's the executive director and co-founder of Bait of Hope. And she brings her unique perspective as a global advocate and philanthropist for Palestinian and Israeli civil society, peace building, and change making initiatives. She was born in Iran and she immigrated to Switzerland during the Iranian Revolution in 1979. Since 2016, she's dedicated her life to building bridges and supporting grassroots change makers. So, with that, what I would like to do is um, for our speakers who are with us today, I'd like to start by having us collectively center ourselves and our audiences on this current moment. For so many of us here today, it is unthinkable that we are ending the year without a ceasefire, with continued and unimaginable suffering and injustice in Gaza, um, with hostages who still have not been returned to their loved ones. And in the US, the reappointment of Trump as our president, which comes alongside a rise in extremist leadership internationally. Now, given that you all come from diverse societies and yet you live in recognition of our interconnection, it would be great to hear from each of you first on how things are looking in your societies in this moment. What is the pulse right now? And second, how are you personally perceiving this moment?
Um, I guess I'm starting, Tiffany. Thank you. Thank you, Tiffany. And really, it's my honor to be here together with my brother and close friend and family, Avner, and my sister and close friend, Mehra, that we also know each other for some years. So, yeah, at this moment where we are right now, close to the end of this year, as all of you that also thank you for joining us today from wherever you are. Like, so good morning, good evening. I'm speaking to you actually from Beit Jala, outside of Bethlehem. Um, and at this moment, like the situation in where I live personally, um, I would say this year generally has been one of the hardest years, where people that um, support violence and military solutions are taking the society into their radical ideas and the practice. And obviously, the situation much, much worse and harder, starvation and the massacres that's happening daily, basically in Gaza. So maybe just to start um, to pray for. I just got some news from friends that there is a lot of hope now, and it talks about ceasefire. So let's pray and hope this is true. And the coming days, that's what they say. Definitely, the settler violence also in West Bank become really. It was already in the place in all Area C in Jordan Valley, East Jerusalem. They take over the place actually, basically. So all the resources, the water resources, the life. And since October 7, actually, this provide an opportunity for these radicals also to increase violence against Palestinian people living here. Obviously, in my eyes, the suffering, which we don't need to compare who's suffering more, we know the power dynamic here, but I believe the suffering also, as Tiffany mentioned, the Israeli hostages still in Gaza, thousands of Palestinian prisoners still in jail, um, thousands of people displaced, Israelis also in the south and the north, and more than 1 million Palestinian displaced in Gaza. Um, so it's really challenging to bring all the uh, the suffering that happening here in this land. Also have to maybe mention, for the sake of the conversation, and things are all related, what's happening in Syria right now, and in Lebanon, and the regional politics. And obviously, it's all connected. We'll talk about this later, I believe, with the American politics. And in the shift between the two administrations, there is a lot of changes that we can feel and see actually in the ground. There is like a marathon of putting facts on the ground before the new administration taking place, especially that some of the uh, diplomats that Trump is appointing are radical. Like I just read today the new ambassador to Israel don't think there is a Palestinian people, like in the first place to start. I was reading about this today, so we can imagine the the politics that's coming here. With all of that, I would say, looking back at this year, I think we'll maybe share more later, like about our experience in this year. I feel the groups and the people that support a military solution and zero-sum game and wars forever are getting stronger in one side, in all sides, and also the people that stand for life are also getting stronger. This is what I see in the reality where I live, how I see things also. And there is a lot of people in between which they search for survival needs, basically. But definitely, we're living in a dangerous moment, I would say globally even. You know, we can't also forget Ukraine and other places and the American-Russian thing and the American-Chinese thing. Maybe I want to focus more a bit on our place in the whole thing, but it's all connected. And so this is maybe opportunity for us to try to also find alliances globally, because I think this is really beyond nations, beyond borders. What's happening is across everything. So our survival, like, really connected with each other. As we say, our freedom is connected. And that's maybe one big lesson that we learn, um, not just this year, but this year has proven this point that our safety and our freedom is connected. And again, as we said in Combatants for Peace, since almost 20 years, we are in this organization together. We came from military and fighting background, and our main lesson was, and still actually true for this moment, that there is no military solution, and people will stay here and will not demolish. So, yeah, I will stop here and thank you.
Thank you so much, Souli. Avner, can we have you answer next?
Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, good evening, good morning. Thanks for joining us. This last year has been the worst that we can remember, with just unbelievable levels of suffering and loss and devastation. And it's really hard to pack all that into a few minutes. People here in the region are confused, angry, hating, afraid. And nobody's sure what tomorrow brings. The levels of uncertainty are just beyond anything we've known before. And we live in a moment that we keep on saying we don't believe this is happening. Now, I'll speak about the Israeli society, at this moment. There are obviously different trends, but in general, people are trying to pull themselves together after October 7th and the war that has happened since, which ushered in unprecedented levels of violence. And at this moment, there's no more attacks on Israel, but in Gaza and in the West Bank, violence continues. There's still hostages, of course, and there's still displaced people in Israel. But the horrible violence that goes on, especially in Gaza, does not really interest people in Israel, and that is where we stand now. So the levels of hatred and racism that were released by the horrible attacks, the crimes of October 7th, basically justified in the eyes of most Israelis, and that is still the case, any level of violence against Palestinians. It was common to say in Israel over the last year, there are no innocent people in Gaza. So that's a kind of blanket justification for any act of violence against Palestinians, no matter who. And most people here don't see, literally they don't see, because they don't show it on Israeli television, what's going on in Gaza. And this was the case over the last year. So most people are not in touch with the situation in Gaza, which makes it very hard to speak about it or to speak against it. At the same time, as Souli said, in the West Bank, the right-wing government is constantly pushing Palestinians, especially in areas C, which is about 60% of the West Bank, trying to drive them out of these areas into very small enclaves. So this is literally ethnic cleansing that is being carried out through different means. And the danger is that this is going to intensify under the Trump administration with tacit or explicit agreement from the White House. And the settlers are getting ready. I don't want to go into the details right now, but they're actually talking about applying what they call the Gaza model, which means displacement, large-scale displacement of Palestinian population in the West Bank. But that does not mean that it's going to happen, but some people in Israel, in high places, want this to happen. So we have to understand how momentous this moment is. At the same time, and I'll finish with that, I do agree with Souli that there are also counter currents in Israel, but meaning that people are saying, well, we can't go on like that, with the violence and so on. But these are much, much smaller currents. I mean, there's no comparison between the mainstream, which is, as I said, is mostly inclined to either ignore or deny the situation in Gaza and what Israel is doing in the West Bank, and the much smaller groups that are resisting actively, or at least are not on board with these policies. So this is where we are right now, as far as I see it. I'll finish with that for now.
Thank you so much, Avner. Mehra? Let's see, Nicole, can you unmute her?
Here. Can you hear me? Well, thank you, first of all, for having me here. It's really an honor, and it's one of the first times that I'm participating in a conference that's organized by one of Bait of Hope grantees, and they actually invite me as a speaker. So thank you very much. My organization, Bait of Hope, works rather behind the scenes, and we support a pool of 20 organizations, peace-building organizations from the Israeli and Palestinian civil society. Some do joint work, some do uninational work. And we've been supporting Combatants for Peace since 2017. And from our perspective in Switzerland, things have been also, of course, not as crazy and devastating as people in the region. But the conversations here are difficult. Everybody is emotional, whether they identify as pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinian. We have managed to create a community here in Geneva that's pro-Israeli and Palestinian peace builders. But even in this community that we have managed to build with Arab donors, Jewish donors, international donors, and Swiss donors, it's still very, very difficult. And we keep doing what we do. You know, we have one mission. It's about supporting the activities of our grantees on the ground, but also spreading their messages in schools, universities, you know, in all sorts of audiences in Geneva, by saying, if you want to help those that you care for, whether you are pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, don't be just that. Be pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian change makers and peace builders. Then you will be helpful. So this message has been, you know, very helpful in these conflicted times here, because people are having like a parallel war here. Although in Switzerland, I must say, it's not so polarized. It's very tricky. Most of the people are pro-Palestinian, and they, you know, their heart is devastated for the injustice and for the loss, etc. And the Jewish diaspora here is quite a small one, and they are terrified because there is a rise of anti-Semitism, and people, you know, allow themselves to say things that they would never say, and that there is a very concerning rise in anti-Semitism. So we're trying to navigate this conflicted and very delicate times here in Switzerland by trying to recenter everything around empathy. That you can, yes, you can have empathy for two people. You can try and you know, if you, especially if you don't have skin in the game, be pro-humanity and be pro-peace. Then you would be helpful. So this is the situation here, and we have managed to keep our community together, and we have had many support throughout the year. Surprisingly, we have raised enough money to continue supporting our grantees, and we will support them as long as they do what they do. So,
Thank you. Thank you, each of you. Yes. So something that I'm hearing from what all of you are sharing is there is this rise or this growing strength amongst extremists and extremist groups. And simultaneously, those who are working for a just peace and working for humanity are also becoming stronger. So you have these two kind of, and nothing is always just two, it's not black or white, but you have these sort of different groups who are becoming stronger at the same time. And certainly we've seen CFP grow and become stronger this year. And Mehra, you've been empowering a lot of groups to become stronger, and you've been strengthening the peace camp through Bait of Hope. And it hasn't been without its challenges. And I've seen that firsthand from a variety of groups, including our own. So I wanted to hear from Avner and Souli specifically about CFP. What are some of the major challenges that the movement has faced this year? And Mehra, you have such a broad perspective and such a broad view because you are connected to so many groups intimately. So I wanted to hear from you, what are some of the trends you've seen in our field in terms of the challenges peer groups have faced? And let's have the CFP members go first. Avner or Souli, whoever wants to start.
Yeah, so it was extremely challenging, but I have to say that if there's one thing that keeps me going is how we handle those challenges over the last year. I feel that almost 20 years of experience in this very delicate work of co-resistance has proved itself. This whirlpool of violence that we experienced since October 7th, it felt and it still feels like a huge wave that is, threatening to drown us all. And I think the whole region. It's true for the whole region, of course, but the one thing that I see so clearly now is how such waves of violence erase the tracks that led to them. So when it happens, we very easily forget what caused all that violence. We forget that there were other futures possible. There were alternative ways, which were alternative paths that were not taken. And we insisted throughout this year that there still is another future possible. And this insistence is what keeps us going. And this is what we were trying to say. So it took us a few weeks of bonding again. I mean, when October 7th happened, and it was again the levels of fear and suspicion, and who are these people from both sides? That made it like the instinct is to go back to your upbringing, your ethnically defined community, where it feels safe or safer for a second. But it took us hours to begin communicating when everything was still up in the air. Nobody knew what was going on around Gaza, and as those kibbutzes around Gaza were being attacked, and news information begins to filter in, and we're trying to make sense of it all. But we already realized that there's something out of the ordinary going on. Israelis were in complete shock. Nothing we ever experienced. This powerlessness, the experience of such massive scale of violence, the massacres that happened. And it was the Palestinians, actually, Souli among them, that contacted us to say, we are with you in this moment. And another day, and we begin to see that the first thing we want to do is to bring the community into contact, the people with one another within, first of all, like anchoring ourselves in this binational community. And we did that, a lot of work. It was mostly over Zoom because we couldn't meet. Another Zoom meeting and another. We tried to build it in a particular way to make it easier for people to express their feelings, first and foremost, at the beginning. No visions, no plans for the future, nothing of that sort at first. First of all, how do we feel? Not what do we think. How do we feel? And are we able to express these feelings in the presence of other people, Israelis, and then Israelis and Palestinians, and so on? And then when we felt ready, and it took us a few weeks, start to speak out and insist that there is another way even now. And we still do it. We started meeting again once we had the chance, and then in the coming months, we started to hold demonstrations and other activities. And this is where we are still today. So I think this is something to take forward. If we can do it in the face of such a huge wave, that is a test that we've never had to face before. We had a lot of violence, you know, what they used to call the rounds of violence in Gaza, which were hard enough, but nothing of this magnitude. And Souli said this is like an ordeal, a fire, testing fire, you know. If we can survive that, we can survive pretty much everything. So this is something that I'm taking for the next year, which might also be very difficult.
Thank you, Avner. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this. So I want to say this. I'm generally like after October 7 and then, October 8 until we are where we are now. Obviously, we have October 6 and before. Uh, all of the trauma came out in both sides, I would say. I'm privileged enough. I know also Hebrew. I'm Palestinian, so I speak Arabic, but also I know Hebrew. So I follow the media on both sides. And basically and literally, um, the media and the Israeli side call it another Holocaust. And then October 8th, from 9, 10 until we're now, the Palestinian media call what's happening in Gaza also a new Nakba, a new catastrophe. So the collective trauma has activated very strong until now. Like I can tell you, like even where I live in West Bank, there is a lot of fear of being kicked from people's houses. Like this fear is really exists, and there is a reason, obviously, for that. Aside, like currently, right now, aside of the historical collective trauma. So, of course, I would say there are many things changed on October 7. One of them, I maybe to share with people here. Usually, because of the power dynamic, the Israeli activists will be in solidarity with Palestinian. At that day, we have to turn to put another hat, which is actually showing empathy to our Israeli partners and friends. And so that was like a strange psychological turn. Um, so it was hard for even Palestinian also to turn this hat, actually. There was a big article about this, psychological wise, and also trauma, and to be in the victim part. So it's not simple to turn into the savior in our empathy. Um, yeah, definitely this was like the strongest, powerful like test that we had because I just want to be like honest and truth. It's so easy to speak about peace and love when you are in a comfort zone. But actually, the real thing when you are hurt. And I personally lost a few Israeli friends. I meant lost them as friends because they turned back to the army. And I said, I, as Palestinian, like I lost my family land, I lost friends, but still I'm committed to my choice of nonviolence and the joint work. In the moment you got hurt, you turn back, then you are not really a partner. So I want to bring this. It's really hard for many people. I know the ability of holding, grounding in this moment, not easy for many people. And we have to show maybe patient and so on. But still, it's really important lesson for me that the people that stayed with us after losing some of their friends, both Palestinians and Israeli, for me are really these like strong people that I wanna continue being partner with them. Um, and that also, like, of course, this is not a faraway thing. Like what happened October 7 and then October 8 and so on. It's we lost people that we know, like friends and family. We lost a few Israelis that we know personally. I personally, we have the famous peace activist Vivian, like she's our close friend, and many others. Actually, some of the kibbutz people and many of the people in the kibbutz are more in like in our kind of partnership. So obviously, the Israelis in our group has lost. Everyone lost somebody that they know, and then immediately the attack on Gaza. There was no time for grief. The events were so quick. And then we start to lose friends and family in Gaza. Especially, we have two people in our movement from Gaza, Ahmed Hilo, that all his family in Gaza, and Fatima, that she work in the Freedom School in Combatants for Peace, her family in Gaza. So they, yeah, lost a lot of their family members. So it's really personal, and we're not talking about ideas like far away. Uh, so I think many lessons, but maybe quickly to say, uh, our having the community really help us to stay strong. And this is a big lesson for us because, like, yeah, we think of like the individualism versus like community. I think this is a big, big lesson. If we are in a community, we don't need to hold all this pain, all this trauma as individuals. So we can support each other because we all go through phases. I mean, I remember Avner, I don't know if Avner, you remember a few days after October 7, some Israeli members were like hesitating, not sure anymore, losing hope. And Avner talked to me and I told him, you know what, I have a vision tonight, like this is the time of collective liberation. And I remember the trust words that Avner gave me that really made me think, um, wow, it's the trust that we build over 20 years, the friendships also really helps. It really helps us to keep the movement together. So I think there's a lot of lessons here, like of um, enriching this community and solidarity within this community, despite the losses are different and so on. But we don't go through like who's suffering more. Like there's a huge um, suffering, especially in Gaza, as you know. But I think we learn through our experiences to honor and to have a place for our full truth, including our pain. Everyone have their pain. And I don't feel less Palestinian to show empathy to an Israeli that feel injured or have a trauma. Rather the opposite, I feel much more even grounded actually to do that. And so with this harsh situation, a lot of moral values came out actually, I have to say. So there is a lot of it's a lot of dynamics here. It's not one way, one thing. And definitely in this situation, we needed a few people that can really show what's possible. Because people easily can lose hope at this moment. And also the survival needs can draw people to some other places and the fear and so on. So someone or some people has to see further beyond what we experience at the moment and to hold space for that without bypassing the reality.
Um, um, for us too, it's not a faraway conflict, Souli, to just refer to what you just said. We also lost immediate colleagues from two different organizations, one on the 7th of October, one in Gaza, in Beit Lahia, 1 month after, in November. So it was a shock. The first thing we did was first and foremost to check on every colleague that we work with in Israel and Palestine, to check on how are you doing. It was not the donor talking to them. It was just because our colleagues have become, after all these years, our friends. And also, we never wanted, even before, since the start of Beit of Hope, we never wanted to turn peace activists into bureaucrats. So we have always had a very simple way of granting grants and, doing our due diligence. But after October 7th, there was this moment where there was a pause and everything was suspended. But then things started again. None of the organizations that we helped collapsed, which was incredible. Even those who had lost had members who had lost the most families or loved ones. And so we just started by being practical and saying, okay, what do you need? How can we shift our help in something that you need? So many of the grantees of Bait of Hope shifted their work towards humanitarian actions. So we said, okay, it's not bridge building. It's not something that was on the paper when we started to grant you, but we are happy to adjust our help. And so one thing that we did is flexibility. And a lot of our help went towards different humanitarian spontaneous projects that were put in place very rapidly. And in Geneva, because people are friends, both Jews and Arabs from the respective diasporas and the internationals and the Swiss, there was a people were very uncomfortable talking about what's going on. So either they avoided seeing each other or they avoided to speak about it. And to the point that we thought if we hold Bait of Hope events, maybe nobody will show up because they will be uncomfortable. But things resumed little by little. And the biggest event we had was just a month ago around the screening of an amazing French documentary called Resisting for Peace. And actually, Ahmad Helou from Combatants for Peace is in it. And there is a scene of conversation between him and Jonathan Zeigen, who's the son of the late Vivian Silver from Kibbutz Be'eri. So around that film, all of our community showed up, and we had 600 participants in the 3 different screenings that we had. And the most beautiful thing that I took as a takeaway from this event was that, our work is on volunteer basis. And so we have many volunteers helping us during the events. And despite what was going on in Lebanon and, the conflict escalating, among my volunteers, I had 2 Israelis who had lost friends, 2 young Israelis, a Lebanese Muslim Shia from South Lebanon, whose village had just been bombed, a Palestinian American originally from Gaza, who used to go to Gaza until 2 years ago, and an Iranian. And they were all helping to make this event successful. And, that was at the very micro level, that's what, the Middle East should look like. And just this gave me so much hope.
Thank you all for sharing, about challenges as well as some of the ways that you have overcome those challenges and some of the things that show promise. I wanted to, with the audience questions coming in and my last question kind of relate to each other. We have questions coming in about how you keep hope and how you move from coexistence to co-resistance. And I would add co-creation because we do more than simply resist. We also create together. How you overcome the simple binary. For those of us here in the US, in some ways, I would say, especially CFP guys are so far ahead of what I've seen recently on the left. You guys have been able to do something that we really need to learn from for the progressive movement in the United States, which has been very split, and we have certainly struggled. That in part, this is what cost us the election, amongst other things, certainly. And so I do want to ask you, as we look to the movement, to CFP, as well as to peers for opportunities to learn, if you could share about some of the skills, some of the practices that we may be able to, and even some of the mindsets that we may be able to glean from as your international allies, both supporting you and trying to support our country to do better and be better?
We're always very hesitant to kind of give advice. We can only speak about our own experience and what is working for us to the extent that it works. I mean, we have to remember that we are unable to affect the big trends, right? And we are solely aware of that. But we are able, and we were able, to maintain this community and keep on speaking out against violence and for a just peace. And right now, the way things look, this is not a small achievement in the way that things stand right now. I want to say a few things. First, I think that holding on to humanity, that may sound very, superficial, but it is. You can call it radical humanity, or sticking to holding on to it while seeing the power dynamics. And this is the two voices you've been hearing even in this talk from the beginning. So while we acknowledge the power gap between Israelis and Palestinians, and while we fight against the system that subjects Palestinians to Israelis, and Palestinian needs are always placed under Israeli needs, we insist on seeing all people as human beings, even those who serve the very systems we're fighting against. This is very difficult, but it's essential, because what I see here and also in the US is these extreme simplifications. So there is the colonized and the colonizer. And the colonized is right just by being colonized. Just as if powerlessness makes you somehow right. I think that people, we need to see beyond that, see the power gap, fight against it, but remember that the colonizers too, or the people on top, are human beings. We have to speak to them as well. And when we forget that, we reach a moral and a political impasse. It's a moral impasse because we lose touch with the very people we are trying to convince here in Israel-Palestine. And politically, we have no way of creating a different dynamic. So what we are trying to do is, other than holding on to our community, as we said, and this is important because values just in and by themselves are not enough, especially when situation gets dire, and it will apparently be more difficult also in the US in the coming years. So we have to remember the importance of political communities. But beyond that, the ability to work beyond boundaries, because in every given society there are hierarchies, there are power dynamics. And if I cannot bridge these gaps or these inequalities and create solidarity beyond these gaps, I will end up working on my own. Because if I am the privileged and I cannot work with the underprivileged, what kind of coalition can we possibly build? Where would the civil rights in the US be without the more privileged people holding hands and co-resisting with people, with African Americans on the South, or the anti-apartheid campaigns? We have to be able to imagine ourselves in other people's shoes and build on that in order to form larger and larger coalitions. We can no longer continue with this, only with this politics of identity in which nobody can, we're just counting where each and every one of us was wronged. The more wronged, the better. I think this is the impasse I'm talking about. Those of us who are privileged, let us try to listen to the people that are not enjoying the same rights and freedoms, and try to work with them to make a better future in which those systems that create these power inequalities are no longer defining our lives.
Thank you, Avner. I just maybe add like a few lessons that what I see from our experience here and what's happening in the US. Especially, I see a lot of hopelessness actually across everywhere. Also among many Americans, like after the election. Um, that actually shows us maybe one to really embrace the complex picture of things actually. And I think this is very important and it's hard, but we need to learn how to embrace this if we want to work beyond our like comfort identities. And I think a joint space is partly a reflection of this. And also to strengthen the point that I've said about coalition building, I think in big part of what's happening here and in the US actually, the purist mindset that we have, some people have. And I want to speak to that a bit because I uh, I think there should be moral values that guide us, obviously, and being pragmatic, being a reality. And that's actually important. Something I personally learned this in jail, how to navigate that. Um, yeah, and I think part of the challenge actually, and I'm not talking about the mainstream now. Like I guess most of the society are not gonna be activists. So let's put this aside. What we want from the majority is to do no harm, and that's all. Uh, but when we talk about the minority, which is like the activist minority, how to bring different activists and different strategies together, that's the big challenge. And I feel part of the lessons that's happening. I've been in touch with a lot of people in the last few months, um, Palestinians, Israelis, and also Americans and others in Europe and other places. People maybe feel the danger of the division again and again is really how to build coalitions that are different from each other, that use different strategies. And this is actually what we want to create. So we shouldn't really let it go of the imagination of the possibility. And this possibility should be actually, in my eyes, we don't know all the answers, but we have to try. And it's really hard also to um, yeah, to tolerate each other to start with. Because the point we don't want to create, I guess, like most of the activists and everybody, like coming from a good intention, but we don't want to create another system of oppression to other group and so on. So I think we have to practice some of the ideas that we talk about, which is basically um, accepting the differences within this activist community that really would be able to mobilize something for like the liberation of the people. And in my eyes, it's actually liberation of the oppressed and the oppressor. And that's why for me, I'm really not so much in this. I mean, definitely there is a power dynamic when we talk about white and non-white. There is a power dynamic with Palestinians, Israelis, and others, and men and women, and all of these hierarchies. But like coming from more indigenous culture, it's much more complex, this dynamics, than black and white thing. Um, and I don't feel like that anyone can take the agency from me and put me in one corner as victim and that's it. I don't feel this. I feel more grounded than many Israelis I know. And it's really connected to the indigenous culture, to the olive trees. We're coming from the land. It's not a utopian La La Land thing. And that actually bring the ancient wisdom that many of us, maybe everyone carry that, no matter which side they come. So I think actually we live really in a very important, interesting historical moments now across the world. For it's changing. The world is changing, whether we want or not. I prefer to embrace this change. I know changes is scary, and people want to stay in comfort zone. So the invitation I finish here, actually, for many people, um, especially I would say in the US, but other places also in the West also, but everywhere. If people think like the status quo is peace, that's not the peace we want. It's a status quo that run the system. So I think the system that in the place now is no longer like serving the world. Something deep need to change. And in our case here, something deeper than ceasefire, which is urgent, obviously, because there is survival need. And hopefully we pray that will happen soon. But also we need like really a deep, serious change, like a system change.
Can I interject, Tiffany, with because when Souli speaks, I always like Souli spoke about agency, and this ties really and about this purist mentality that has taken over parts of the left. In some parts, it was always there, and I think we have to speak to that because this notion of creating sterile environments, and I see that sometimes in universities, and in which we are all supposedly beyond all those things that we see outside, all the other people. I don't know, Trump supporters, the Israeli right, they are all these things. As if we are pure, as if we are beyond racism, we are beyond stereotypes. And every political action, I believe, should begin by looking at the mirror. And we would recognize, if we only look, all of these things inside of us. We are never beyond these things. And therefore, to project all the things that, and this is what I think very often happens in these crusades against all the words that we should not say, as if by not saying those words, we are cleaning the world of all these, feelings and emotions that we are uncomfortable with. We have to recognize that we are all, we have all kinds of emotions and fears and within ourselves. And only by recognizing these things, we'll be able to engage. And I think what we don't do enough is engage. What I see more and more is this canceling, right? I hear something that I don't like, so I cancel, as if he's no longer there if I cancel him or her, but he's still, or she's still out there, and she's still speaking to people, I don't know, spreading racist ideas. So we need to first recognize that these things are also part of us. And then through this recognition, try to understand why it speaks to other people, and then engage, and then try to make the change. It will not happen by keeping to our sterilized bubbles and feeling that we are somehow superior to all others.
Yeah, when Souli says, the oppressed liberate the oppressed and the oppressor, recognizing I am both. And that idea of do no harm, Thich Nhat Hanh, he said, inside all of us is this cry, please don't kill me. And that idea of canceling each other as we try to do this work together and yet want to remain in the room and build power is a contradiction. I do see the movement has the ability to navigate even when you harm each other and you don't leave and you stay. And it is such an inspiration. So Mehra, I would love to give you the chance to respond as well. And thank you, Souli and Avner, for your sharing your deep insights and what the movement has been doing this year in this regard.
Mehra, you're muted.
Yeah, it takes every time it takes a few seconds. Well, I think that working on common ground, because sometimes you think you're very different, but actually you have some common ground, working on common ground, and then on empathy, and then on your way of speaking to others. I think the nonviolence communication is a way to engage people, to listen to you rather than cancel you, because the point is to be heard and to be listened to and to be able to express oneself. So maybe these are the things that as societies we should work on.
So we will close out our time in 10 minutes, and there are a lot of great questions. Obviously, we can't get to all of them today, but just keep with us in 2025. Keep meeting with us, ask questions. Let's keep learning together, leaning into each other, growing closer and stronger and deeper and wider. So as we get ready to close out our time, I wanted to ask each of you, as we all look to the year ahead, and we're all looking for ourselves, strength, hope, centeredness, wisdom. I wanted to ask if each of you could share with us a simple mantra, something that maybe has value to you that we can center ourselves on in this time as we close the year and the year ahead, and that we can be saying with you for strength and for hope in 2025.
I don't mind going first. So I'm borrowing this mantra from a friend, and it's all about what we're trying to do here in Switzerland and helping everyone we can. So, and by staying loyal to our slogan, basically, be pro-Israeli and Palestinian change makers rather than sides. So my mantra that I borrowed from this friend would be two truths in one heart.
Two truths in one heart. Thank you. Avner, Souli, who would like to share next?
I mean, actually, I didn't think about it before, but like at this moment, I remember something in Arabic from like a Muslim scholar, Ali ibn Abi Talib. I guess Mehra knows. I think we lost Mehra, maybe. I don't see her in the screen. Anyway, so yeah, do you want to make sure she's here? Oh, no, I see her, but she's in that spot. Yeah, welcome back. Yeah, and was part of my journey in my life, like when I was 15, like 16, reading Ali ibn Abi Talib in Arabic. Like there is a lot of books of wisdom that he left, um, and mainly like one of them was do 1,000 steps to turn your enemy into a friend, and don't do any step that will turn your friend into an enemy. this is the energy, the soul, the spirit of togetherness, actually. That's what I feel tonight.
2,000 steps to turn an enemy into a friend, not one step to turn a friend into an enemy. Mhm.
And in the same spirit, I would quote Hillel Zaken, one of the olden wise people, that is to me the very basis of the kind of Judaism that I connect to. I'll say in Hebrew and I'll try to translate. I'm sure there are people here in the audience that know how to say it properly in English. מה ששנוא עליך, אל תעשה לחברך. Whatever that is that you don't want to be done to yourself, don't do to others. And this is, for me, the very, very basic, beyond any political principle and before any political principle. It is that. And politics should make sure that this is the reality of as many people as possible, regardless of origin, gender, and nationality, and just try to do good, increase understanding and love in the world. How do we turn this into politics? That is the challenge, rather than keeping it in the level of mantras. But this is what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Avner. Don't do anything to others that I don't want done to myself. Do for others as I want done to me. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here. We hope that this time together has been inspiring, helpful, good for your soul. I know we didn't get to talk much about political action, which many people did ask us about. We have a very big year ahead of us, and so we will take those actions together. Let's stay close. Souli, Avner, Mehra, thank you so much for speaking today. Mehra, we are so honored that we're your first group to ask you to be a speaker. You're obviously such an important part of our field and an incredible leader and friend. So thank you very much for joining us today. And I'm
And a
going to
huge thank you to you, Tiffany and Nicole, and all the people in and Lindsay in American Friends of Combatants for Peace. It would have been so difficult to go through this year without you, and it means so much to see that what we're doing here resonates across the Atlantic. I cannot express our gratitude, really, to all of you, and to you that joined us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Avner. Thanks, Souli. We are all here, all of us who are here, so honored to be a part of the movement. So I will now hand this over to Nicole for a few closing remarks and housekeeping.
Thanks, Tiffany. Thank you again to all of our speakers who joined to chat with us and answer some questions as they reflected on the last year and look forward to the next year. So, and thank you again to all of you who joined us today. We will be sending out the recording as soon as possible. If you joined later because of our technical difficulties, we will send that out to you so you can see the whole thing. So apologize for that, and thanks for sticking with us. And this is just a quick reminder to you all that we're working really hard to close out our year this year. So we're looking for end of year gifts. If you're able to give this year, we would be so honored if you chose Combatants for Peace as one of the organizations for your generosity. We can't do this work without the solidarity and support from all of our amazing supporters. So we invite you to join us if you're able. If you're not able to support us financially at this time, I encourage you to take a look at our Take Action page, which has some amazing options for getting involved. And just stick with us into the new year. We're looking forward to 2025 with hope, and we invite you to join us. Thank you so much.